In the heart of Africa, within the Great Rift Valley, lies Rwanda, a land of 1,000 hills. Its history is deeply intertwined with two groups of people, the Hutu and the Tutsi, for centuries. Their story has been told through a lens of conflict, culminating in the tragic events of 1994. But to truly understand, we must look beyond the headlines and journey back in time, to a period when the lines between Hutu and Tutsi were not as rigid as we imagine them today. Before the arrival of European colonizers, the terms Hutu and Tutsi were more like socioeconomic classes than distinct ethnic groups. They spoke the same language, Kinyarwanda, shared the same cultural practices, and lived side by side in the same hills and valleys. A Hutu, who was traditionally an agriculturalist, could become a Tutsi by acquiring cattle, a symbol of wealth and status. Similarly, a Tutsi who lost their herd could become a Hutu. The distinction was fluid, based on occupation and social standing, not an unchangeable ethnic identity. The Kingdom of Rwanda was a complex society with a Tutsi king, the Mwami, at its apex, but power structures were intricate and interwoven. Everything began to change in the late 19th century with the arrival of German, and later, Belgian colonizers. Seeking to simplify and control the population, they introduced a rigid, racialized system. European race theories of the time, now completely discredited, were used to create a false narrative. They measured skulls and noses, claiming the Tutsi were taller, more European-like ruling class who had migrated from elsewhere, while the Hutu were the indigenous Bantu people. This was a myth, but a powerful one. In 1933, the Belgians cemented this division by issuing identity cards that labeled every Rwandan as either Hutu, Tutsi, or Twa. What was once a flexible social marker became a fixed, inescapable part of one's identity. Passed down from father to son, this colonial policy of divide and rule had devastating consequences. The Belgians favored the Tutsi minority, placing them in positions of power within the colonial administration and providing them with better educational opportunities. This created deep-seated resentment among the Hutu majority, who felt systematically oppressed and excluded. The seeds of ethnic hatred were sown not by ancient tribal animosities, but by a colonial strategy designed to maintain control. The sense of a shared Rwandan identity began to erode, replaced by a growing we versus them mentality. The traditional social harmony was deliberately dismantled, paving the way for future conflict as independence movements swept across Africa in the mid-20th century. The political landscape in Rwanda shifted dramatically. The Belgians, in a sudden reversal, switched their support to the Hutu majority. They saw the rising Hutu elite as the key to maintaining influence in a post-colonial Rwanda. This ignited the Hutu Revolution of 1959. Years of pent-up resentment exploded into violence. Thousands of Tutsi were killed, and over 150,000 were forced to flee to neighboring countries like Uganda, Burundi, and Congo. The monarchy was abolished, and in 1962, Rwanda gained independence as a republic dominated by Hutu political parties. For the next 3 decades, Rwanda was ruled by Hutu-led governments that continued to marginalize and persecute the remaining Tutsi population. They were treated as second-class citizens, a foreign element within their own country. The exiled Tutsi, meanwhile, formed diaspora communities. A new generation grew up in refugee camps, dreaming of returning to their homeland. From this dream, the Rwandan Patriotic Front, or RPF, was born in Uganda. Initially a political movement, it soon developed a formidable armed wing, determined to fight for the right of return and end the discriminatory regime in Rwanda. In October 1990, the RPF invaded northern Rwanda, marking the start of the Rwandan Civil War. The conflict lasted for 3 years, characterized by intermittent fighting and failed peace accords. Inside Rwanda, the government used the RPF invasion as a pretext to further demonize all Tutsi. Extremist Hutu media, particularly the infamous radio station RTLM, began broadcasting relentless propaganda. They dehumanized the Tutsi, calling them cockroaches and snakes, and stirred up fear and hatred among the Hutu population. This constant incitement prepared the ground for something far worse than war. On April 6, 1994, A plane carrying Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana was shot down as it prepared to land in the capital, Kigali. The culprits have never been definitively identified, but for Hutu extremists, it was the trigger they had been waiting for. Within hours, roadblocks were set up across the country. Militias, armed with lists of targets, began a systematic campaign of slaughter. Neighbors turned on neighbors, friends against friends. Over the next 100 days, an estimated 800,000 people, overwhelmingly Tutsi but also moderate Hutu who opposed the killing, were murdered. The world watched, but did little to intervene. The genocide was only stopped when the RPF, resuming its military campaign, swept across the country and captured Kigali in July 1994. Their victory ended the killings but triggered another massive humanitarian crisis, as millions of Hutu, fearing reprisal, fled into neighboring Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of Congo. The post-genocide era has been a long and difficult journey of rebuilding a shattered nation. The new government, led by the RPF, abolished the ethnic identity cards that had caused so much division. They promoted a new narrative of national unity. Ndi Munyarwanda, we are all Rwandans. Today, Rwanda has made remarkable strides in economic development and national reconciliation. The story of the Hutu and Tutsi serves as a powerful and tragic reminder of how social divisions can be manipulated and weaponized. It shows that ethnic identity is not always an ancient and changing fact, but can be a political construct with devastating real-world consequences. Understanding this complex history is not just about looking at the past. It's about learning the lessons necessary to prevent such tragedies from ever happening again, in Rwanda or anywhere else in the world. Thank you for watching. If you found this documentary informative, please like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into our shared history.